Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to WaddsCon. I'm going to let people join before we kick off. Please say hello in the chat, as you always do, or on Twitter. The hashtag, as ever, is hashtag WaddsCon. I want to thank you if you paid for a ticket today. That donation has gone to my local food bank. It enables my firm to make a monthly donation of around 500 quid a month, and that's really appreciated. I want to welcome our speakers today. I don't think, and here they are set out before you, I don't think we've ever had such a brainy set of presentations or discussions as we had today. We're joined by colleagues to talk about communication accessibility and simple practical steps to ensure your content reaches the largest possible audience. We're going to talk about why PR is so worthy and what we can do about that. Tom is going to rant from Cannes and the conversations that have been going on this week. We're going to talk about socio-economic diversity in the industry and a specific intervention to tackle that. And then finally, our final session will be about how we can make the industry more attractive to young people and attract younger people. The format is simple. If you've attended before, each speaker will present for 5 minutes or so, followed by a discussion. Please drop comments into the chat or, as I say, on Twitter, hashtag WaddsCon. So our first speaker, if I stop sharing my screen, our first speaker is George Coleman. Now, Corey Camgos at the PRCA introduced me to George. He's the CEO of Current Global. He's also the author of the PRCA's Guide on Communication Accessibility, and he's got a really good presentation here talking about the issues around accessibility, but also some really practical steps we can take as communication practitioners to ensure we reach the widest possible audience. George, welcome.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone for joining today. So I'm going to talk about how we make our work accessible. So when we talk about accessible communications, we mean communications that are inclusive and accessible to everyone. However, content is published every day that's inaccessible to many. Campaigns are launched that have not been designed to be inclusive of people of all abilities, and we must change this. Disabilities come in many different forms, both visible and unseen. The disabilities that are most directly connected to and impacted by the accessibility of our work are visual, hearing, cognitive, and speech. And according to the World Health Organization, 1 in 8, that's over 1 billion of the world's population, have some form of disability. With an aging population, more than 2 billion people will need at least one assistive communication memory or hearing aid in the next 10 years. Here in the UK, circa 20% of us will experience communication difficulty at some point in our lives. And that's a significant audience to exclude by default or by design. But unfortunately, the PR industry does that every day. And I feel that I'm on a bit of a personal mission to change this because of my life experience. The picture you have on the screen is of my father and my uncle, 2 working class lads from East London, who are both deaf. So I grew up in a family with deafness and the challenges of communication. To help us understand a little bit more about the lived experience of how people with disability consume media and content, we actually commissioned the first of its kind piece of research. We surveyed 800 people in the UK and the US who self-identified their impairments and disabilities. And we found that people with disabilities consume all kinds of content: news, social media, video content, films, podcasts, audiobooks, streaming music, you name it. They consume exactly the same kind of content that we do. Even people with blindness, 98% of them consume visual content weekly or more often. So all of the content we put out there, people with disabilities want to consume, but the research found that most struggle. Just over half use an assistive tool, but many don't have access to assistive tools, whether it's too expensive, it's too complicated, or it simply doesn't work for them. And even when people do have access to an assistive tool, they still struggle. 2/3 of people who use assistive tools struggle to consume content. 34% because of the limitations of what the tool can do for them, but 30% because of the problem of the content itself, the way the content is developed and designed, and that's on us. It's on us as professionals on behalf of our clients too. Looking at social media specifically, that's the most problematic of all of the different channels. People with disability really truly struggle to consume content on social media. And many have normalized this really poor experience. And that was the hardest part of reading of this research. And emotionally, it really takes a toll. 81% have negative emotions towards brands when communications aren't accessible. They feel disconnected. They don't feel excited about the brand. They feel the brand lacks positive qualities or is unreliable. Conversely, when we drive content and communications that are accessible, the opposite is true. The response is overwhelmingly positive. And that leads to a significant rise in brand preference, purchase intent, and peer recommendation. 60% say that they would actively choose to purchase from the brand or to recommend to others. And people with disability, that community, 1 in 8 of the world's population, collectively have $13 trillion worth of purchasing spend every year. That's a significant audience to exclude, and with a significant amount of money to spend with our clients and the brands we work for. And what I find truly shocking is that of the large corporations that have DEI programs, so around 90%, 9 in 10 today have DEI programs, only 4% are focusing on disability inclusion. So there's a real disconnect between the opportunity and the reality, both within our client organizations and the work we do today. So for me, it's not just a moral thing that we have to change, make sure all of our communication is accessible. It's a good thing for business too. And as Stephen mentioned, to help instigate change across the industry, we partnered with the PRCA to create the first ever set of communications guidelines for accessible comms. And in there, you'll find really simple tips, tools, advice on how to make content accessible. It's really easy to get started. In every Microsoft application, there's an accessibility checker. You should be hitting that whenever you produce a document as you would hit spell check. We should feel just as embarrassed sending over typos in a Word document as we would or should do if we send over a document with accessibility errors. And lastly, to help try and instigate broader change, we have created a microsite, accessible-communications.com, to host a lot of this content, guidelines, research. I think it's going to be refreshed in the next week or so with even more resources, events, news about accessibility and more. And on that site, we're asking people across the PR community to commit to working towards implementing those PRCA guidelines. And here on the screen is a snapshot of some of the brands that have already signed up to make that commitment. And collectively, they represent more than 5,000 PR professionals worldwide. And if as a result of the conversation we have today, you can join that 5,000, that would be awesome. And that's me done.
Thanks, George. Do you want to stop sharing your deck and we'll pull out some questions? That's great. Thanks for that. George, you said we'd normalize the experience on social media, the most acute environment. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, people with disabilities have normalized a poor experience, full stop. So while social media is the most problematic platform, it's problematic because it's really hard for assistive technology to access that content. And all of those platforms have different tools to implement accessibility features. It's a challenging environment. But more broadly, people with disabilities just have a super poor experience of consuming content and media online, to the extent that when we asked them the survey, what can brands do differently? Almost universally, the answer was the same. Just don't know. They don't understand, or they don't, they just don't know what to do. and they just kind of accept that experience. And we have people within our organization that have some severe disabilities. We employed someone who's blind at the beginning of the year, and that experience is totally her experience. That it's just every day she just expects a poor experience online.
You promote the financial benefit of doing this, but surely it's more of a moral and societal issue, isn't it?
It's both. It's both. I think it's for me, obviously, my experience with my family sort of has given me a motivation to try and instigate this change. But helping people understand that the effort to go to make the small incremental changes to the way they work is super important, and actually has a commercial outcome as well. Whether you're an agency person like me, helping your clients be able to reach that extra 15% of the audience that they're currently excluding, or for the client themselves to realize actually as a brand they're missing out on a market opportunity, it means that everyone feels comfortable about investing in the changes that they need to make.
So you suggest the solution is tools such as Microsoft accessibility tools. What else is there out there? I mean, lots of us have moved to Google during Google Suite during lockdown. Is it supported there?
Yeah, most platforms will have their own set of tools, online platforms. Within the guidelines, we list out or give you links to the accessibility toolset on Facebook, on Twitter, and so forth. So all of those platforms will have a set of tools. But there are some common practices that cut across every platform that just makes it easier for people to consume content. So, for example, it's having closed captioning on videos or audio descriptions. It's adding a little text description of an image. It's called alt text, so that someone can use a screen reader and it'll describe what the image is trying to convey to that person. It's about thinking about how you moderate your language and write simply and clearly and effectively, things which should be best practice anyway. So there's a set of common best practices that we should be applying to all forms of content that we generate, whichever platform they are ultimately published on. And then those platforms may have additional features that we should be aware of on each of those to make sure that that content is as accessible as it possibly can be. I would also say that it's important to think about accessibility, not just in the sort of last mile of production of content, but right at the beginning, because that changes the way you think about campaigns, full stop. So rather than simply being accessible, they are truly inclusive in that way. And so you start to make considerations like, well, I probably shouldn't just do this on Clubhouse because that's excluding people with hearing disabilities. Actually, I should think about this in a multi-channel way. What are the different ways I'm going to bring my campaign to life through which kind of content in order to make that truly accessible to everyone?
Final question. So you're building a community of practitioners, asking for agencies and brands to sign up to these standards. What does that involve?
Well, simply, we're asking people to implement the best practices that are laid out in the PRCA guidelines, and that was co-published with the PR Council in the US. And it's about committing to making the changes to work towards implementing all of them. So we're not expecting anyone to be perfect from day one, but it's just acknowledging that you're going to work towards that. And as I say, there are some very simple steps that you can take. If after today's call, you just, every time you save a Word document or a PowerPoint document, you use Microsoft Accessibility Checker, that's a key win. And that will cover a huge amount of the work, volume of the work that we generate as an industry anyway. And then it's just about making other things that we need to do just very habitual as we go through our working day. So adding alt text, thinking about things like color contrast on design and so forth. The things that we can internalize. And I remember when I started in PR back in the days when dinosaurs still stalked the earth and TV was in black and white, a piece of advice I was given was internalize the Economist style guide. I think all we need to do is internalize that PRCA guide, and then accessibility will just become second nature.
I'm going to dig out the PRCA guide and drop it into the text along with some other links. George, I want to thank you for a great presentation. You're right, simple nudges are the most effective way to affect change, and you'll notice we've got closed captioning here, which I implemented after our very first conversation. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you to George. As ever, please drop questions into the chat and the hashtag WaddsCon on Twitter. Next up, we've got Tom Rouse. Tom is the creative director at activist agency Don't Cry Wolf. I'm a non-exec of that agency. He's here today to try and inject some fun back into our business. Tom thinks we've got too worthy. And certainly after reading the op-eds, wringing hands about the lack of creative awards scooped up by PR agencies at Cannes, I've kind of got to agree. Tom, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Cool. Hey, everyone. It's really great to be talking to you about this today. And I think it's particularly important given the talks we've got coming up from Sarah and Martin as well about kind of inclusivity and accessibility and broadening up PR. Actually, if we don't get this right and we don't make PR exciting to people, then the rest, those kind of initiatives, which are amazing, are always going to be fighting an uphill battle. And I've had these two lines ringing around my head for the last month or so, and it's not because I'm skeptical about England's chances of beating Germany on Tuesday. If you're not familiar with them, this is the opening commentary that is used in the classic football anthem Three Lions from the Euro 96 version, and it's two commentators bemoaning England's lack of creativity and lack of positivity. That, as Wads teamed me up with, these equally could have come on from any byline on PR Week or PR Moment or in any of our other esteemed industry publications over the last few months, years, the decade I've been working in PR. I feel like we have this same conversation every time. Oh, we're not creative enough as an industry. We're not positive enough as an industry. And fundamentally, we're sucking all of the fun and life out of our industry and all of this energy by being so down on ourselves, because we all know there's nothing sexier than confidence and self-confidence when it's handled in the right way. And the reverse is true. There's nothing less sexy than someone who is constantly down on themselves, constantly kind of doing themselves down. And what I don't understand about PR and what has always frustrated me about this industry is some people in our world seem to relish it. They seem to relish knocking us down and going, oh, we're not creative enough. There was an event last year run by one industry body which said, should PR even bother being the creative agency? Or should we just roll over and let ad agencies and other marcoms agencies own that creative space and we just play the support role? And I don't understand why. And you read these Cannes articles, Danny Rogers pointed out that a PR agency hasn't won a Grand Prix at Cannes in the last 12 years since the PR category was introduced. And on the surface, that seems like a real creative problem. But I don't think it is. We're so obsessed with Cannes that Cannes isn't meant for us. Cannes is an ad agency festival for everyone to go and have a week on the beach and pat themselves on the back about how amazing their films were. And if you look at what the ad industry is saying, actually, the ad industry hates Cannes. There's all of these complaints about work being created just for Cannes, which never goes beyond one advert on Facebook and one billboard and is done just to win a Cannes Lions. It's not meant for us, and that's okay. When we get obsessed with Cannes, all I can think about is what would happen if pop music got really obsessed with winning the Oscar. Yes, they're both entertainment dramas in the same way us and advertising are both marcoms industries, but we are completely different functions. And just to be clear, this is not the fault of PR Week for publishing those bylines. If we didn't send them to them questioning our own ability as an industry, PR Week would not run them. It's not like John and Danny and Arvind are out there going, do you want to slag the industry off? No, it gets sent to them and that's what they're being sent. And what I don't understand is, yes, we are creative enough, we are positive enough. You look at some of the amazing work PR agencies have done over the last 3 years, and it deserves to win a Cannes Lion. It's not the work's fault we don't, it's in fact we're not meant to be playing there. So what I've been trying to unpick in my brain and through my conversations with Wads about this topic over the last couple of weeks and months is actually, how have we got to this lack of self-confidence and how do we fix it? And fundamentally, I think our challenge is we work in an incredibly uncertain field. Whether you do consumer, whether you do B2B, whether you do corporate, we're not in complete control of the outcomes of our work because we are reliant on journalists. So there's always a level of risk in PR, particularly big creative PR campaigns. And that makes us all uneasy. It makes me uneasy. I've been doing this for a decade now, and I still get nervous the night before a big sell-in of what if every journalist hates our campaign? That's not easy. But we've managed to turn that uncertainty and risk into actually a negative. It's become kind of a chain around us where we become so risk averse in this that we cut things down. We ask ourselves, well, is there a safer way of doing this? Should we be less bold and do another piece of research and another white paper and another webinar, knowing that we'll get results and we can kind of feel much more in control of those versus the big creative ideas, which, yes, they're scary, but actually when they come off, they're amazing. And again, like I said, it's not just consumer. This applies to every aspect of PR. Secondly, I think we're obsessed with fighting the wrong battles. We still talk about ADE. We still talk about whether PR should contribute to sales. We've won the ADE fight. We know PR should contribute to sales, and yet you can't go by a week or month without seeing another agency going, well, is PR about sales? What should we do to get rid of ADE? We've won those fights. Let's move on. We've got bigger battles to fight. And fundamentally, I just think we need to believe in ourselves and what we can do. Because I don't know about you guys, but the pandemic for me, yes, it was exhausting, and yes, it was challenging, but it actually showed the value of PR to so many of our clients, big and small alike, because we were there consulting them on, well, how does this communicate? How do you communicate in a world where you can't just buy an advert at a bus stop or on a tube and communicate your message to people? We know trends better than anyone. We know culture better than anyone. We have a real chance to actually influence how Marcoms works going forward, but we can't do that if we're continually fighting the same old battles. And we've managed to make that, like Wad said, I'm the creative director of Don't Cry Wolf. We're a specialist brand activism agency. And we firmly believe that purpose can be fun and exciting. And that just because we're talking about serious causes doesn't mean we have to be dull, doesn't mean we have to be worthy. But there's always that little nagging voice when I talk about brand activism. When people ask me about brand activism, they're like, isn't that all a bit serious? Isn't that all a bit kind of like, oh, actually, you're just lecturing people? It's quite the opposite. The best brand activism campaigns, our own work, we do our best when we have some fun. We've put the idea of naughtiness for good at the center of what we do, because fundamentally we believe actually something a bit cheeky and a bit naughty is far more likely to instigate positive change. And it doesn't always need to be that. The best brand activism campaign of this year, bar none, was EA Sports putting Kian Prince in the game. Raising awareness of knife crime, communicating to young people using a tool they're already using rather than expecting them to come up to us. Hugely effective, hugely sexy, because it got results and it got people talking about knife crime and the tragedy of lost teenage lives to knife crime in a way that just issuing a press release saying this many people are dying from knife attacks. Yes, those stats are hard, but actually they're not going to do the job. So that's our problem. What's our solution? Fundamentally, it has to start with self-belief and self-confidence. We are creative enough. We are positive enough. This is my mantra for the PR industry. We need to start telling ourselves these things constantly, and we need to back ourselves. When someone has a big, creative, bold, and yes, scary idea, our response shouldn't be to look for reasons not to do it. Our response should be, this is amazing. What do we do to make this the best possible? And how do we work with our clients to make this work as well? Secondly, as I've already said, we need to stop talking about the wrong things. We need to start focusing on what matters, how PR can change the world, the confidence we bring, and the knowledge and strategic insight we bring to clients. And thirdly, and finally, and please, if I can ask you all one thing, it's this: we need to talk the talk. Next time you hear someone doing PR down, challenge them. Point out all the amazing campaigns which win PR Week awards. We talk constantly about wanting the CMOs to take us seriously. And if a CMO read PR Week, they're going to take their PR brief to literally any other agency on their roster saying, you guys must be more creative than this lot, because they don't believe in themselves. No one else will love us if we can't love ourselves. And that's my message to you guys. If we're going to get the sex back, if we're going to make ourselves less dull and less worthy, it has to start with self-confidence, and it has to start by us loving ourselves so that everyone else will love us. Thank you very much.
Great presentation, Tom. Really, really great. We should also give a massive shout out actually to anyone that's worked in the public sector or public health during lockdown, because they're during the COVID crisis, because their public relations has really shone brightly and shown itself to be absolutely critical as a strategic function. Tom, why, and a couple of people have chipped into the chat about this, why would we rather have a discussion about a bitch about an agency using AVE or floating something down the Thames than actually talk positively about our own sector and look at the good, right? Some of the incredible good that's going on.
I honestly wish I knew. I mean, I deliberately didn't talk about floating things down the Thames because it's such a crazy.
There's been another one there.
But also, like, floating stuff down the Thames works, and I think that's the dirty secret. I think people still write about it. People post about it on social media, and we've got ourselves into this headspace that unless it's something an ad agency would never do, it's almost not good enough. And I think it's that. I think we've got obsessed with perfection, and if it's not perfection, we don't want to do it. We're worried about the risks, and we're worried about how other people comment. And I think it's self-defense. I think we basically criticize ourselves because we're worried other industries and other agencies will criticize ourselves if we don't do it first. So it feels to me like it's a shield. We'd rather fight these battles we feel safe talking about, because we know then we're in the lead. Whereas actually, if we step into new territory, it's unknown, it's uncertain, and it's bringing an element of risk that I think we as an industry just aren't that comfortable with.
So related question. Why the obsession as well about creativity? I mean, we've shown ourselves. You're right. We shouldn't measure ourselves along ad agency. We're in a completely different business. So it's the same introspection, right? I want to know. I wish I could understand why we're so obsessed about talking to ourselves.
I honestly, and I'd love to know what people in chat think. I genuinely wonder if it's just related to budgets and the fact we look at ad agency budgets and go, well, they get a lot more money, so they must be better than us. But actually ignoring the fact that advertising as a discipline is far more expensive than public relations. Like don't get me wrong, as a creative director, I would love a client to hand me £750,000 and say, do something fun with this. But the reality is we don't need that. Some of the best PR campaigns we've seen over the last few years have been done on an absolute shoestring. The PR campaigns I've won awards for myself, showing off for a minute, none of them have had more than 15, 20K as the budget, and that's included our fee, and we've managed to produce video on that. I think though, it's partly like we look and go, well, they're spending far more money with this discipline, so that must be more creative and must be better than us. Ignoring the fact that actually our strength comes from you don't need to spend a lot of money to get PR right. When we do PR right, we get people to set up and talk about us versus having to pay for people's attention. And that, I think, for me, is we earn people's attention. Going back to the very old peso model, and earned attention is far more valuable. But because paid attention costs a lot more, I think there's this naivety sometimes we're looking and go, well, they must be doing something that we're not to command such bigger budgets.
Who's going to do PR for PR? How do we fix this? So confidence is one thing, right? But that's not a specific intervention, is it? Well, who's going to do PR? We need PR for PR, right?
Yeah, well, I think you've got to look at the PRCA, you've got to look at CIPR. Where are the PR campaigns championing us to the rest of the industry? I think we're incredibly good at talking amongst ourselves about change. And I'm really, really conscious that's exactly what I'm doing right now. But actually, we as an industry need to stand up and say, look, there's different forms of creativity. Creativity isn't just shooting a £2 million TV ad and putting a load of spend behind it. It's finding new ways to talk about old topics to people. It's getting journalists excited. We all know that journalists are far harder to excite than the general public. There's a real magic there when we do that. But actually, going beyond the industry and where are our campaigns? There was a great PRCA campaign last year talking about the power of PR and the value of PR, but most of the case studies were PR people. That would have been far more powerful for people outside PR if it had been sales directors, finance directors, the CMO, people within government talking about when they've been influenced by PR. And I think actually that is the solution, is how do we get non-PR people talking about why PR is important to them, rather than always relying on ourselves to champion ourselves, because a lot of us, a self-deprecating bunch, we instinctively lean towards this slight negativity, and actually sometimes just do what we do, get someone else to blow our trumpet. We do it every day for our clients, so why aren't we doing it for our own industry?
Tom, that's a great place to end. I want to thank you for your presentation. You've lit up the chat, PR for PR, and talking to people outside our own industry rather than ourselves. Thanks very much, Tom.
Thanks, Wads.
All right.
Bye.
I am going to introduce now an individual who certainly talks outside the industry. She'll talk to anyone that will listen. She's been recognised for this. A fierce advocate for public relations practice to the management discipline. So much so, she was awarded a CBE in the Queen's Honours. It is, of course, my very own dear wife, Sarah Waddington. Sarah, hello. How are you?
Hello. Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You pitched really hard. So you're here today to talk about Socially Mobile. That's a community interest group we've just started aiming to tackle in-work poverty and support practitioners seeking to achieve their optimum potential. The stage is yours.
Thank you. And I just realized two really basic mistakes. If you don't do a presentation because you're trying to be cool and deconstructed, you get to just see my face, which was, I should have thought about that. And number two, if my tummy rumbles, it's because Wads hasn't made me my lunch yet. So I'm going to apologize in advance. Now, obviously Wads put my session up talking about the industry as posh and privileged, which is quite provocative. And I guess that's right, but I'm going to move away quite quickly from that to talk about why the intervention's needed. And I would say that I know that saying that we're posh and privileged is provocative, because the first time I mooted Socially Mobile publicly, a raft of middle-aged men came out from under their rocks and emailed me to tell me that I was wrong and there wasn't a problem about inclusivity in our industry. So when that happens, you know you're onto something, you're onto a winner, and that you've got to keep going despite that sheer knobbery. Anyway, let's talk about Socially Mobile. It is exciting to be able to finally talk about this and have it close to formal launch for applications. The reason it's important is that if you read the PRCA's PR census, if you read the State of the Profession by the CIPR, it has been absolutely evident for years that as an industry, we are becoming very much a closed shop. And we are for two reasons. One, we are quite affluent as a profession, and we seem to expect that people can come in and do free work experience in order to get the experience they need to get a decent job. And actually that can't happen. And secondly, we are above the national average for people who've been educated at private schools. Now, I'm not saying I have a problem with any of those people. I will work and talk to anybody who shares values that I have. But if we are to have an industry which is balanced and represents the industry that we serve, we need to do better than that. Now, someone pointed out to me the other day that the PRCA census shows that there are more Black, Asian and ethnic minority practitioners in our industry. Great, but actually we're still not solving the problem. They're still mainly in junior roles, and we have to change that. So what's Socially Mobile and where does that fit in? Well, Wads and I have spoken for quite a long time about this. The original concept came out of my year as CIPR president in 2018, when I'd seen the data at my fingertips and felt that there was definitely a gap in the market for something that would help address this major problem. And we'd originally looked at setting up a formal charity whereby that would be a fundraising goal, and we'd give money to educational establishments and people would be able to apply to do the training that they want. And actually with COVID, with being knocked back by the Charity Commission, everything changed, and we have created a completely new and innovative and hopefully disruptive business model that will now see us as a community interest company deliver training over an 8 to 10 week course. We're still, you can imagine it's still iterating at the moment, but based on an exec education program model. So we will have some fantastic lecturers and some fantastic masterclasses every week over probably 10 weeks, where you when you apply, you get accepted onto the course, and you can go online, and every week you watch a lecture, you watch a masterclass, you do a bit of homework, and at the end of the 10 weeks, you will hopefully come out with a certificate and be part of a community of like-minded individuals who are all trying to step into a slightly more senior role. So what we're looking to achieve is, this is not for people who are just entering the profession. This is for people who have done a couple of years, who are tactically proficient, but who are unable to get into that next strategic role that will help them increase their earning potential. And what we're doing is, the why it's hopefully innovative and disruptive is that people from lower socio-economic backgrounds, people who've been badly affected by COVID, those underserved groups like our disabled colleagues, women returners, Black, Asian and ethnic minority practitioners, they will have the ability to apply to get on the course free of charge, but we will also taking fee-paying practitioners. So we have a cohort, no one knows who is paying and who's not, but everybody gets equal access to it to be able to improve their strategic competencies. So really exciting. We're still, like I say, doing the build. Thank goodness for WADS, because the partnership works, and that I get to a certain point and then fall over because it all seems too technical, and he's able to help with that. But we have some really fantastic lecturers. We have some fantastic supporters. I have a particular shout out to Curzon PR and Don't Cry Wolf, who have come in as corporate sponsors alongside WADS Inc. and my agency Astute.Work. And we hope to be opening to our first cohort the applications in summer to have the first course actually running this autumn. So exciting time, quite daunting. This intervention is I think is very, very timely. People talk about PR, they say, oh, there's no cap on salary, it's a very affluent industry. Well, it is, but there's also a very significant problem that people don't talk about, and that's in-work poverty. You know, we have people who sofa surf in order to have a job in the capital. We have people who have a number of different commitments at home that they probably don't bring to work, whether that's caring duties or their own issues. And, you know, we need to better serve these people, and we've got to get away from this situation where, you know, basically we're mainly white, middle-aged people who are dominating this profession. And I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning. If we are to serve society's communities appropriately, our teams, you know, our teams need to be diverse too. And I think that, in a whistle-stop tour, is Socially Mobile in a nutshell. Is there anything, bearing in mind that you're developing this with me, that you want to mention?
Definitely, Tom. I want to talk about middle-aged men crawling under from rocks. and emailing you.
Oh, there's always loads of them. I get them quite regularly, and as we know, and I've now got a quite quick way of filing them under B. But you know what? It is. I knew straight away with Socially Mobile, well, I knew from the beginning that it was important, that it was needed. Number two, when you get those people telling you that there isn't a problem, you know absolutely fine well that there is, and that you just got to keep persevering. And I got a bit of trolling on Twitter. Do you remember the first time I mentioned Socially Mobile? And it just makes you even more determined to shut them up. And I don't even argue with them now, because there's no point. You can't change their perspective. What you can do is influence where you can change and help the people that deserve it.
Talk about that specific intervention, because it's at a particular moment in an individual's career. Why focus on this? It's sort of the gap between craft and management skills. Why is that so critical?
Well, I think that's really important. And there is support for people who are entry level into the industry. It's not massive, but there are apprenticeships, there are different routes in, and you've got the bigger agencies that offer internships. But we have a real problem at the point where people get into a position where they've probably done 2 or 3 years, they're really tactically proficient, and for one reason or another, they're not getting the CPD that they need in order to develop. And that might be for a multitude of reasons. They might want to be able to pay for it themselves, but they just can't afford it. And let's be honest, this happens, we don't talk about this enough. They may be part of an organization where they're just not interested in providing further CPD. They don't want to invest in them. Women returners, you often see that, you know. I have been part of so many agencies or heard so many conversations where they've said, we don't want to pay for so-and-so to have that training. She's just come back from maternity leave. She's likely to go off again. It's not a good investment. You know, that kind of thing happens. You know, we don't actually hear, it was great, that first presentation there, because you very rarely hear about our disabled colleagues. You know, what interventions, what initiatives are there for those people who, you know, who just very quietly get on with their job, but as it was mentioned before, just live with, you know, live with a situation whereby their needs are not being served appropriately. And we certainly know from this past year how much help our Black ethnic and minority, Asian and ethnic minority colleagues need, because again, those needs are not being addressed, and we don't really understand. We're not prepared. We do understand, we're just not prepared to address the endemic issues that we have in our organisations, because it feels too bloody difficult. Well, we're past all that. We need to address it, and this is one way to hopefully get people who are tactically competent into at a point whereby they can either hopefully be promoted internally or find a job elsewhere where their strategic capabilities will be recognised. Or one of the things I haven't talked about is start their own business, because of because of the level of competency that we expect from those who apply, we have recognized that they may decide that going somewhere else isn't for them. It's time for them to set up a business. And so there are some specialist core competencies and modules that we deliver, and then also some specialists. So you can look at what it would take to start that own business if you wanted to.
Brilliant. So lots of people asking how they can find out more and help. So where do we find it? On Twitter? Where's the website? How can people help?
Brilliant. Well, thank you first off for the fantastic response that we're having, and actually on the chat here. The website is sociallymobile.org.uk, and I didn't do slides because basically I would have literally just copied and pasted from that. So please do have a look. We're pretty much there. So we've had a few requests recently for people saying that would be happy to do a lecture or a masterclass. I have to say we're pretty much at capacity now for that. But what we will be doing shortly is going out looking for people who have perhaps education experience, because we're going to need some assessors who can assess the applications that come in. Obviously that's not a problem for fee payers, but for those who are applying for a pre-place. But secondly, there will be coursework every week, so we need people who can help us work through that to make sure that people are understanding the content and responding accordingly. So there's an assessor's role that we're looking for. And I guess the other thing is, please, when we do finally launch in summer, opening up for applications, if you know anybody in your circles, send them the details. We want to make sure that we reach the people who really need this, and that's really important. And I guess the final request is, this is a community interest company. Basically, Wads and I have put in quite a lot of not just time, but quite a heavy financial investment to get this off the ground. And we have been supported by Curzon PR and Don't Cry Wolf, and we are getting individual donations coming through. If you did want to support, please look at the website. There's a way to do it via the website. And if you have members of the team that you think are tactically provisioned, but you think would benefit from it when you look at the modules and the coursework, please put them on. It's a little bit like the old Tom's initiative, that when you buy a pair of shoes, you'd be sending a pair of shoes to someone who needed it. Effectively, you're doing the same, because once we're up and running, the more people we can get on, especially those fee payers, it starts to wash its own face, and it means we can scale and help more people again. So I guess that's the big request right now.
Sarah, I've got to ask this. I think this is the first time you've spoken in a semi-public role since you received your notification from the Queen of an honour. You joined a community with Stephen Hawkins, Hugh Laurie, Helen Bonham Carter, Johnny Wilkinson in being awarded a CBE. You're certainly one of the people in the industry, and yeah, I'm your biggest fanboy, that does speak out. But what difference is this going to make to you, do you think?
To me, I don't know. I mean, I'm still, if I'm honest, I'm thrilled to bits, and I'm still really shell-shocked. I mean, I talked about our industry being posh and privileged at the beginning. I'm certainly not posh. I'm privileged now. I wasn't before, but I'm very privileged these days. And I guess what's lovely about it is the recognition that of trying to do something that will help our industry go further. I want to make 2 points about that. One is that the work I've done hasn't been in isolation, so you take future-proof the community there. That works because people give their time and energy free of charge, and this is exactly why Socially Mobile will hopefully be a huge success, because again, people are stepping forward and they are doing what's needed to help level the playing field. And I think what I'm keen to do is hopefully, well, it's inspired me to keep going, and hopefully it will inspire others to do their bit. Because my argument is, I mean, I look back when I saw the application that was put in without my knowledge, actually you suddenly realize about how the scale of work, that I hadn't even appreciated the scale of work I've done over a couple of decades now. So, and I think it's because I've done it piecemeal. All the things that have mattered to me, I've done bit by bit, and then I've grown it out and built it out and built it out. So my ask of everybody is just find the thing that matters to you most and do what you can. And even if that's a little bit, all those little bits of change that everybody does creates wide scale change. And it's really important right now because the divide in society is bigger than it ever has been. And I'm determined not to let, I'm going to get political, those Tory people win. I said it nicely, but we can do better than this, and we need to, you know, all do our bit.
Thank you very much. I look forward to lunch in about 20 minutes. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
See you later. Martin, hello. How are you, sir?
Well, thank you very much. And you?
I'm good. I'm good. So, Martin, we've got to know each other. You're studying public relations at Leeds Beckett. We got to know each other over the last few months, 6 months or so, I guess, because we've had some really thoughtful conversations about our profession, covering actually a lot of the issues that have been covered here today. How we need to be recognised as a profession, we need to be more diverse. And you've spotted that one of the issues is, or one of the interventions we could make is very early on in engaging younger people in conversations about public relations so that they see it as a potential career. So that's what you're here to talk to us today. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll just share my screen quickly. Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much. I'm certainly not Posh to Sarah, but I'm privileged to speak after Sarah Waddington, CBE, today. So it doesn't get more exciting for a young person just cutting his teeth in public relations. Yes, I'm going to be speaking on telling your story. Just a little bit of a background. Prior to my commencing a master's program in public relations here at Leeds Beckett University, I spent 7 years there about working with an NGO where we raised advocacy for road safety. And I was really passionate about what it is that we did there because I had lost 2 cousins to road traffic crash, 2 separate incidents of road traffic crashes. And I was really passionate about it and still passionate about it. But my experience at Lifeline Care brought me to a closer understanding of the enormous power that storytelling wields in shaping people's behavior and influencing society as a whole. And frankly speaking, it is not different from what public relations practitioners do every day. I can guarantee that Sophie, Adam, Ryan, Tila, Sarah, Stephen, just name it, they've all gone out today to tell stories that attempt to connect their clients to their public, that attempt to manage various crisis situations, that attempt to build relationships. But I fear that we may not be telling our stories enough. And Tom, just a moment ago, talked about bringing sexy back in PR, but importantly, who's going to do PR for PR? And I think that we are not doing that enough, and there's a place for us to do a lot of that. And I say this because the average child, the kid out there, when confronted with the question of what is it that you want to be in future, would rarely produce public relations as an answer. And sometimes it doesn't even matter if the parent of such a kid is a public relations practitioner. I fear that they may not be able to connect the value that public relations have, what public relations practitioners do to their real life. And it's such an irony for me because public relations are the heart of the ideas that people have of other mainstream professions like medicine, the law, accounting. I mean, we have told kids that a doctor saves lives, so they want to be a doctor. We've told them that a lawyer defends. We've told them that an engineer builds. We've told them that an accountant saves money, and they want to be those professions. But we should also tell them too that a public relations practitioner sustains society. Indeed, I think that is what we do by making those social bridges, by building relationships between people, making people feel good about themselves. That is what we do. Relationships are the backbone of every society, and public relations is at the heart of that. That for me is some kind of superhero stuff. Again, because we're talking about kids, the easier way for them to connect to things is by ascribing some sort of characters to them. And I think that it doesn't get any better than some kind of superhero images to the professions that we have. So I think PR is that Superman who flies around the world, making connections, building bridges, so that people can feel good about themselves, and we can, of course, make the world a better place. And I think that we must be very deliberate about getting young people to be interested in public relations. And why is that? Why is it important for us to make public relations attractive to young people? There are no few reasons to that, but I'll just highlight a few. Number one is that in today's world, young people are a major consideration and catalyst for a lot of the changes that we are seeing in our world today. A lot of public policies, organizational policies, are as they relate to young people. How does this resonate with them? How does this affect the younger population in every society, or your younger target audience? But more than that, I think that young people are also at the heart of a whole lot of innovations, by way of creativity, designs that young people are coming up with every day. And public relations can certainly tap from those resources, from that kind of asset. Number two is sustainability. It's important for us to begin to think how we can make public relations sustainable. At the moment, and I've had this discussion with a number of people, including Stephen Waddington, during my last podcast. There is the idea that public relations is mainly a place for middle-aged people, especially those who have studied a career in journalism and then they cross over to public relations. So there is the need for public relations to be very, very deliberate in getting more young people into the profession so that it is sustained. Now, how can we go about this? The first thing I think is the elephant in the room. Entry-level PR positions has got to be entry-level PR positions. I think public relations is one of those professions where you are almost always required to have some sort of experience before you come into the profession. And I don't think that is the best way to go about it. Yes, we've talked about several routes to entry by way of your qualifications, whether it's academic or apprenticeship. But there's got to be that period of conversion from academics to practice. And agencies and firms should always make room for that. People have got to come with no experience at times, young people, and be allowed to learn. There should be that period of conversion within the profession. I must acknowledge that is happening in some sense, but that has got to be the norm more than the exception. The second thing is mentorship. There's room for increased mentorship of for young people. Yes, the CIPRO, the PRCA has got a number of mentorship programs that young people are ascribing to, but there is still a need for more. And it is in this regard that I also want to appreciate people like Stephen Waddington, for the platform that they are giving to people like us to come show ourselves, come into the profession. Today it's me. The last time it was Ursula Ojiji. Before that it was Sophie Smith, and just the sheer availability to help you through your profession. It's commendable, but that has got to be multiplied across board. We need more people who have earned a place in public relations to take more younger people under their wings, so that they begin to learn the rudiments of the profession. I said this whole presentation by talking about storytelling. So I would like to end on that note too, by saying that we can also do little things. When you go back today and you have a recommendation to make for that PR campaign, and it involves making a suggestion for a children's book manuscript, recommend to them how communications is vital to our society, so that children from early on begin to get a sense of what it is to be a communicator. When you go back home and you're reading that bedtime story to your kids, also tell them how you and your fellow PR colleagues are sustaining society by building social bridges, by making relationships. And finally, when the CIPRO and the PRCA sits to plan its yearly activities, it should include more career exhibitions to young people and show them how public relations is saving our world one story at a time. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That's great. Very thought-provoking presentation, and a number of us were recognized that moment when you said really uncomfortably, you said even entry-level positions, you're expected to have a level of experience. And you're right, you're absolutely right. It's really important. Right, I'm going to pull out a couple of questions. So Katrina says, with the barriers to Black PRs already well established, how do you think we can link PR's value to their own lived experience?
Yeah, I think it's a major problem. I mean, I was having a discussion with someone yesterday, and this was part of the things we're talking about. First thing, I think we need more models. People with those kind of backgrounds should be put in the front, and that's why once again I'll go back to WaddsCon and the opportunity that someone like me, I'm obviously from a Black Asian minority ethnic group, Black. So we need more people of those backgrounds to be in the forefront, to make this kind of presentations, to serve as mentors, as role models to people. There is need for people to see themselves in players, players in the public relations profession. So I think that one way to go is to have more models from those backgrounds taking center stage within the public relations profession. And just like Sarah spoke before now with socially mobile, I think that's a good initiative. More of that needs to happen, and I think that will be able to make connections between Blacks and then the PR profession.
So shout out to the Leeds Beckett massive here. The Leeds Beckett is really a force of energy, isn't it, in turning out future generations of PRs. You mentioned Sophie Smith. So Sophie and I have done a piece of work looking at the agencies that have started over COVID, and we found that most of them have started in London, but actually the notion that the PR industry is based in London is completely wrong, because data we found from the ONS and Companies House shows that actually it's based in regions and towns and cities right the way around the UK. Leeds Beckett being one of those. How long before you graduate?
Just slightly less than a year. Yeah, I should be done by next year, February, March. Yeah.
So what's your vision for your future career?
Okay, yeah. So I hope to go into more of social advocacy. I think it's my thing. I'm fascinated about storytelling, as you can tell, obviously, but storytelling for a purpose, to help society become better. I've spent the last few years doing advocacy in road safety. I would like to take that further, some kind of agency work that maybe focuses on CSR, some kind of corporate social responsibility. I have bigger dreams of going into bigger NGOs like the UN, and stuff like that. Just so that I can be part of bigger interventions, bigger storytelling. I'm passionate about making our society a better place, and I feel like communication, storytelling play a very major role in making that possible. So I look to be able to deploy my skills and interest in that direction. Yeah, so and I'm talking about Leeds Beckett. Yeah, indeed. Leeds Beckett is indeed a place where it's really sharpened my interest in public relations, and a whole lot is happening there. I'm glad to see some of my classmates here whom we've shared the last few months together doing lots of fantastic projects.
That's great. It's really great to see. And you thank me for this platform. I want to thank you. Reciprocal. Getting new, fresh voices in like your own, with the interventions that you propose, really, makes people like myself think about how we could be doing stuff differently and truly innovate. So thank you for that. We're almost up against time. Thank you to Martin and all our speakers for a fantastic session today. I started by saying it was almost certainly the most thought-provoking session we've had, and was going to be, and it certainly has been and lived up to that. Before we go, here's the lineup for next month. Before we take a break for the summer, we're going to be back now on the 30th of July. We're going to talk about, Paul Clark's going to talk about photography and the value of images. Shirley Lynn's going to talk about the opportunity for behavioral science in public relations. We get an awful lot of requests and feedback for comment on insight on ESG, and so we have the comms director of one of the world's largest water and waste companies who's going to share her experiences, and then finally Nigel Starbucks is going to join us and talk about a rough guide to freelancing. thank you for joining today. Thanks to Sophie for helping me behind the scenes. Sophie Smith, she makes all this possible. Thank you for taking part. You'll receive a recording of today's event in the next day or so. You'll also get a feedback form and a form to pitch for future sessions. We're looking to book sessions now in September and October. So if, like Martin or any of our speakers today, you've got a thoughtful provocation you'd like to share with the WaddsCon audience, we'd be grateful to hear from you. And that's it. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay safe and have a great weekend. Thank you.